During the mid-7th century BC, the Neo-Assyrian Empire ruled over the largest territory that the world had ever seen at the time. Leading this vast empire was a cunning military commander named Ashurbanipal, who was popular among his people but merciless when dealing with enemies. His obsession with collecting knowledge led him to construct the Royal Library of Ashurbanipal, which has been referred to as the most precious source of historical material in the world. Ashurbanipal, whose name means Ashur has made another son, was born in the Neo-Assyrian capital of Nineveh in 685 BC. He descended from the Sargonid dynasty founded by his great-grandfather Sargon II after he usurped the Assyrian throne in 722 BC. Ashurbanipal's grandfather Sennacherib and father Esarhaddon were both very successful rulers who had helped form the largest empire in history up to that point. Upon conquering Egypt in 671 BC, Ashurbanipal's father became the first ruler in history to control both Mesopotamia and Egypt. King Esarhaddon suffered from a severe skin disease and died only 2 years later as he was heading back to Egypt to put down a rebellion. Despite being his father's fourth son, Ashurbanipal was appointed heir to the majority of the Assyrian Empire and rightfully claimed the title King of the Universe. His first goal as ruler was to mobilize an army to crush the rebellion that his father had planned to end in Egypt. Ashurbanipal defeated the rebels with ease and campaigned as far south as Thebes. The city of Thebes was so thoroughly sacked that its destruction is used in the Hebrew Bible as an example of the devastation that can befall a city. By 665 BC, Egypt was once again under the complete control of the Assyrian Empire. Ashurbanipal appointed an Egyptian prince named Psamtik as pharaoh. The prince had been captured several years earlier and forcibly re-educated as an Assyrian puppet ruler. Shortly after installing Psamtik as pharaoh of Egypt, Ashurbanipal turned his attention to a new threat on the other side of his empire. The kingdom of Elam, led by King Urtak, had taken advantage of Ashurbanipal's prolonged absence in western Assyria by invading Babylonia in 665 BC. The surprise attack was easily repelled by the Assyrians, and King Urtak died shortly thereafter. Ashurbanipal's brother, Shamash-shum-ukin, grew tired of his inferior position as king of Babylon and began conspiring against his brother. Unbeknownst to Ashurbanipal, his brother had been sending secret aid to Elam in an effort to destabilize his rule. Ashurbanipal eventually launched a devastating attack on Elam in 653 BC, which culminated in the Battle of Ulai near the Elamite capital of Susa. There, Ashurbanipal won a decisive victory over the Elamite kingdom. The king described his victory by saying, "With the encouragement of Ashur and Ishtar, I killed them. I cut off their heads before one another. I dammed up the Ulai River with the bodies of the warriors and people of Elam. For 3 days I made that stream flow full of bodies instead of water. Like the onset of a terrible hurricane, I overwhelmed Elam in its entirety. I cut off the head of Teoman, their king, the haughty one who plotted evil. Countless of his warriors I slew. With my hands I seized his fighters. With their corpses I filled the plain. Their blood I let run down the land. Its water I dyed red like wool." In this relief sculpture, Ashurbanipal and his queen can be seen dining in Nineveh as the severed head of King Teoman hangs from a tree on the left. Thus, by the end of the 650s BC, Ashurbanipal had succeeded in expanding the Assyrian Empire to the greatest extent it would ever reach. These palace reliefs found in Nineveh, called the Lion Hunt of Ashurbanipal, show the king taking part in the Assyrian royal tradition of hunting lions. Lions were viewed as menaces for centuries, and these hunts were symbolic of the king's ability to protect the Assyrian people from its enemies. The tensions between Ashurbanipal and his brother Shamash-shum-ukin eventually led to a civil war in 652 BC. Shamash-shum-ukin was greatly outmatched and outnumbered from the beginning of the war, but managed to sustain his cause for several years by seeking alliances amongst his brother's enemies. In reference to the situation with his brother, Ashurbanipal said, "In these days, Shamash-shum-ukin, the faithless brother of mine, whom I had treated well and had set up as king of Babylon, every imaginable thing that kingship calls for, I made and gave him. Soldiers, horses, chariots. I equipped and put into his hands cities, fields, plantations, together with the people who live therein. I gave him in larger numbers than my father had ordered. But he forgot this kindness I had shown him and planned evil. Outwardly, with his lips, he was speaking fair words, while inwardly his heart was designing murder." Despite building a notable coalition, Shamash-shum-ukin's cause was futile, as his brother's armies laid siege to most Babylonian cities, including Babylon itself, which eventually fell in 648 BC. It is believed that Shamash-shum-ukin and his family either set themselves on fire in order to escape captivity or were burned alive by the attacking Assyrian soldiers. Ashurbanipal describes his victory over his brother and his allies by saying, "The gods who march before me, slaying my foes, cast Shamash-shum-ukin, my hostile brother, into the burning flames of a conflagration and destroyed him. As for the people who hatched these plans for my hostile brother, and did evil, but who were afraid of death and valued their lives highly, they did not cast themselves into the fire with Shamash-shum-ukin, their lord. Not one sinner slipped through my hands. The chariots, coaches, palanquins, his concubines, the goods of his palace, they brought it all before me. As for those men and their vulgar mouths who uttered vulgarity against Ashur, my god, and plotted evil against me, I slit their tongues and brought them low. Their dismembered bodies I fed to the dogs, swine, wolves, and eagles, to the birds of heaven and the fish of the deep." With his brother gone and the civil war over, Ashurbanipal decided to punish the Elamite kingdom for all their sins against the Assyrian people by besieging the Elamite capital of Susa, massacring all of its inhabitants and leaving it in ruins. Ashurbanipal describes his victory as follows: "Susa, the great holy city, abode of their gods, seat of their mysteries, I conquered. I entered its palaces. I opened their treasures where silver and gold, goods and wealth were amassed. I destroyed the ziggurat of Susa. I smashed its shining copper horns. I reduced the temples of Elam to naught. Their gods and goddesses I scattered to the winds. The tombs of their ancient and recent kings I devastated and exposed to the sun. I carried away their bones toward the land of Ashur. I devastated the provinces of Elam, and on their lands I sowed salt." This relief sculpture shows the humiliated king of Elam, Humban-Haltash, being forced to serve food at the royal court in Nineveh. Ashurbanipal enjoyed torturing defeated kings and is said to have once put a chain through the jaw of a king and forced him to live the rest of his life in a dog kennel. Ashurbanipal decided against appointing any puppet kings in Elam and made no attempt to incorporate the region into his empire, instead leaving it empty and undefended. Choosing to ignore Elam proved to be a fatal mistake because the Medians would go on to migrate into the abandoned region, rebuild the destroyed cities, and play an instrumental role in the eventual downfall of the Assyrian Empire. The second conquest of Elam in the mid-640s BC was the final major military campaign of Ashurbanipal's life. He had been at war for nearly 25 years by that point, quelling rebellions in Egypt, Anatolia, and Babylonia, as well as conquering the kingdom of Elam. With his massive empire finally at peace, Ashurbanipal was free to turn his attention to more scholarly pursuits. He constructed the world's first systematically organized library called the Royal Library of Ashurbanipal, or sometimes referred to as the Library at Nineveh. Ashurbanipal was obsessed with ancient tablets and wanted to own a copy of every text that was ever written. He commanded hundreds of scribes to search for texts across the known world and make copies for his library. The king described his motivation for constructing his library by saying, "I, Ashurbanipal, king of the universe, on whom the gods have bestowed intelligence, I have placed these tablets for the future in the library at Nineveh for my life and for the well-being of my soul, to sustain the foundations of my royal name." Ashurbanipal himself was a voracious reader of the texts within his library, and many of the surviving tablets bear his royal mark, indicating that he had read or consulted them personally. Ashurbanipal had been trained in the scribal arts before becoming heir to the throne, and this made him feel far superior to previous kings. He boasted of his unique abilities and great intelligence, saying, "I studied the secret lore of the entire scribal craft. I know the celestial and terrestrial portents. I can solve the most complicated divisions and multiplications which do not have a solution. I have read intricate tablets inscribed with obscure Sumerian or Akkadian that are difficult to unravel. I took my pleasure in reading stones inscribed before the flood. The best of the scribal art, such works as none of the kings who went before me had ever learned." The prolific English writer H.G. Wells referred to the Library of Ashurbanipal as the most precious source of historical material in the world. The Royal Library was buried during the Battle of Nineveh in 612 BC and lay buried beneath Ashurbanipal's destroyed palace until English archaeologist Austin Henry Layard discovered it in 1849. Layard took over 30,000 tablets from the library to England, where they have been preserved at the British Museum in London ever since. The most important text found within the library was the Epic of Gilgamesh, which contained a version of the Great Flood story that predated the Bible. Today, the Epic of Gilgamesh is considered a literary masterpiece and is widely regarded as the world's earliest surviving work of literature. In 631 BC, after 38 years on the throne, Ashurbanipal died of unknown causes at the age of 54. A civil war between Ashurbanipal's two sons erupted over the throne, weakening the empire from within and resulting in Assyria's enemies becoming restive. A revolt broke out in Babylon, led by a rebel leader named Nabopolassar, who conquered the city from the Assyrian Empire and crowned himself king of Babylon in 626 BC. Nabopolassar's conquest of Babylon gave birth to the Neo-Babylonian Empire, which went on to survive for less than a century. King Nabopolassar formed an alliance with the Medes, Persians, Chaldeans, Sumerians, and Scythians against the Assyrian Empire. Their combined armies marched on the empire's capital of Nineveh, and in response, the final Assyrian king, Ashurbanipal's son, Ashur-uballit II, fled to the city of Haran, which he established as the empire's new capital. The king formed an alliance with his Egyptian vassal, but their combined forces were no match, and they suffered a devastating defeat at the Siege of Haran in 609 BC. It's unknown whether King Ashur-uballit II died during the siege, but he simply vanished from historical records after the battle. With no leader, the defeat marked the end of the Neo-Assyrian Empire, as its lands were divided between the Medians and the Neo-Babylonians. Thus, the empire that Ashurbanipal had carried to its strongest position and through which he made profound contributions to learning and world literature was conquered after only about 20 years after his death. Through great brutality and intellect, Ashurbanipal controlled the largest empire the world had ever seen and built the greatest surviving collection of ancient knowledge ever discovered. Consider liking, commenting, subscribing, and clicking the bell icon below for more videos like this. During the late 7th century BC, as the Iron Age drew closer to an end in the Near East, the mighty Neo-Assyrian Empire was finally conquered and succeeded by the Babylonians under the leadership of King Nabopolassar. Although Nabopolassar founded the Neo-Babylonian Empire, it was his son, Nebuchadnezzar II, who succeeded in expanding the new empire and restoring Babylon to its former glory. This was the first time in 1,000 years since the reign of Hammurabi that Babylon had risen to dominate Mesopotamia. As a result of his portrayal in the Bible, Nebuchadnezzar would come to be regarded as an oppressive and cruel enemy of the Jewish people. Nebuchadnezzar II, the eldest son of King Nabopolassar, was born in 642 BC and was likely named after his grandfather, who was a governor in the city of Uruk under the rule of King Ashurbanipal. The name Nebuchadnezzar is derived from his traditional Akkadian name, Nabuchodori-Ushur, which translates to, "O Nabu, protect my firstborn son." Nabu being the Mesopotamian patron god of scribes, literacy and wisdom, who gained great prominence during the first millennium BC after being identified as the son of the most powerful god of the Babylonian pantheon, Marduk. As crown prince of Babylon, Nebuchadnezzar took part in his father's campaign to conquer the city of Haran in 609 BC, where the final Assyrian ruler, Ashurbanipal II, had gathered the remainder of his forces. The Battle of Haran led to the ultimate defeat of the Neo-Assyrian Empire. Subsequently, Nebuchadnezzar was promoted and began taking charge of troops alongside his father. Together, they led an army into a mountainous region north of Assyria in 607 BC. After his father returned to Babylon, Nebuchadnezzar continued to lead independent operations, serving as commander-in-chief and securing major victories that solidified Babylon's status as the new superpower in the region. The Egyptian pharaoh at the time, Necho II, attempted to restore the fallen Neo-Assyrian Empire by leading a large army into former Assyrian territories and establishing a base of operations in the city of Carchemish. Nebuchadnezzar faced Necho and his forces in 605 BC at the Battle of Carchemish and dealt the Egyptians a devastating defeat. Nebuchadnezzar's victory over the Egyptians at Carchemish echoed throughout history, appearing in several later accounts such as the Book of Jeremiah and the Book of Kings in the Hebrew Bible. When King Nabopolassar died in July of 605 BC, Nebuchadnezzar rushed back home to Babylon to stake his claim to the throne before his younger brother, Nabu-shum-lishir, had a chance to steal it. Nabu-shum-lishir was never mentioned in documents again after this point, leading historians to speculate that he probably led an unsuccessful revolt that resulted in his demise. Upon becoming ruler, Nebuchadnezzar spoke directly to the patron god of Babylon in his inaugural speech, saying, "O merciful Marduk, may the house that I have built endure forever. May I be satiated with its splendor, attain old age therein, with abundant offspring, and receive tribute of the kings of all regions, from all mankind." After burying his father, Nebuchadnezzar returned to the front lines in Syria to continue expanding what was now his empire. In 604 BC, Nebuchadnezzar and his men conquered the city of Ashkelon in the Levant and proceeded to capture its king, plunder its treasures, and leave it in ruins. Over the next 3 years, other states, including the Kingdom of Judah, submitted to the surging Babylonian Empire, and, with the help of Greek mercenaries, the empire was extended into Palestine. Progress was halted abruptly in 601 BC, when Nebuchadnezzar chose to march against Egypt. Despite having defeated the Egyptians at Carchemish, the attempted invasion of Egypt was a complete and utter failure. There were heavy casualties on both sides, but the failure resulted in a loss of confidence for the Babylonians. Vassal states started to doubt the power of Babylon, referring to the infant empire as a paper tiger. At home, Babylonians began to disobey Nebuchadnezzar's direct orders and even organized rebellions against him. Turning his attention away from Egypt and back towards the Levant, Nebuchadnezzar led his army into the Syrian desert in 599 BC, attacking and raiding Arabs along the way. 1 year later, the Babylonians captured the city of Jerusalem in a campaign against the kingdom of Judah. Hoping that Egypt would lend support, Judah's king Jehoiakim challenged Nebuchadnezzar's authority and ultimately suffered greatly as a result. King Jehoiakim died during the siege, and his uncle Zedekiah was subsequently installed as ruler of Judah by Nebuchadnezzar. Further campaigns into the Levant followed, including the capture of the Phoenician city of Tyre. The Babylonian army swept through the region, leaving a trail of devastation in their wake. Nebuchadnezzar took full control of all trade routes across Mesopotamia and expanded his empire in every direction. The warrior king was persistent in his policy of expansion, believing a universal kingship to be a right granted to him by Marduk. Following the unsuccessful invasion of Egypt, Zedekiah of Judah refused to pay tribute to Nebuchadnezzar and revolted in 589 BC. This led to Nebuchadnezzar's defining moment, the complete annihilation of the city of Jerusalem, including Solomon's temple. The destruction of Jerusalem prompted the permanent end of the kingdom of Judah. As many as 20,000 Judeans, thought to make up 25% of Jerusalem's population at the time, were captured and deported to Babylon. The deportation of a conquered city's citizens was a common tactic that was often employed by the Assyrians during their time in power. The destruction of Solomon's temple and the Babylonian exile were seen as fulfillments of biblical prophecies. These events led to the strengthening of Judaic religious beliefs and began the Israelites' transition from the polytheistic beliefs of Yahwism to the monotheistic beliefs of Judaism. Yahwism's pantheon of many gods was headed by Yahweh, the national god of the Israelites, along with his wife, the goddess Asherah. The second-tier gods and goddesses consisted of Baal, Yarek, Mot, and Astarte, who each had their own priests and prophets. The Hebrew Bible would go on to refer to Nebuchadnezzar as the destroyer of nations and a cruel and mad ruler sent by God to punish the Israelites for their many sins. 18th century English painter William Blake's famous depiction of Nebuchadnezzar as a mad king is based on the book of Daniel's unflattering description of the ruler, which reads, "He was driven away from people and ate grass like the ox. His body was drenched with the dew of heaven until his hair grew like the feathers of an eagle and his nails like the claws of a bird." On the other hand, Babylonian sources describe Nebuchadnezzar's reign as a golden age that transformed Babylonia into the greatest empire of its time. Among Nebuchadnezzar's many accomplishments were the completion and expansion of fortifications initiated by his father, building a great moat and outer defense wall, constructing canals, paving the processional way with limestone, and renovating the city's temples. The beautiful Ishtar Gate that led into the heart of the city was ordered by the king to be surrounded with blue tiles and adorned with images of animals representing gods. Nebuchadnezzar was exceptionally proud of the Ishtar Gate and added a dedication plaque inscribed in cuneiform that read, "Nebuchadnezzar, King of Babylon, the faithful prince appointed by the will of Marduk, the highest of princely princes, beloved of Nabu, of prudent counsel, who has learned to embrace wisdom, who fathomed their divine being and reveres their majesty. I laid the foundation of the gates down to the ground water level and had them built out of pure blue stone. Upon the walls in the inner room of the gate are lions, bulls, and dragons, and thus I magnificently adorned them with luxurious splendor for all mankind to behold in awe." Lions represented the goddess of love and fertility, Ishtar. Bulls represented the god of storms, Adad. And dragons represented the central Babylonian deity, Marduk. Behind the enormous bronze gates protecting the city were solid gold statues and an opulent grand temple. The most well-known construction associated with Nebuchadnezzar are the Hanging Gardens of Babylon, which are recognized as one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. Legend has it that Nebuchadnezzar's wife, Amatis of Media, missed her forested homeland so much that the ruler built the extravagant gardens to remind her of home. Supposedly, the gardens were built on a slope that consisted of a series of terraces that were supported by pillars made of baked brick and tar. A Greek historian named Diodorus Siculus described the gardens as being 400 feet wide, 400 feet long, and 80 feet high. The gardens being so high up likely meant that water was carried to the top of the gardens by a primitive water irrigation system. The exact location of the hanging gardens remains a mystery to this day, but there are skeptics who believe the gardens were located elsewhere or never existed at all. After ruling for 43 years, Nebuchadnezzar died in Babylon on October 7, 562 BC. The empire's throne was succeeded by one of his sons, named Amel-Marduk, but he was overthrown and murdered less than 2 years later. The new Babylonian Empire was short-lived and only lasted another 20 years before being conquered by Cyrus the Great and incorporated into the Achaemenid Empire. Nebuchadnezzar was the longest reigning king of the Neo-Babylonian Empire, and at the time of his death was the most powerful ruler in the world. Through his considerable military prowess and remarkable construction accomplishments, Nebuchadnezzar immortalized himself as one of the greatest rulers of the ancient world. Consider liking, commenting, subscribing, and clicking the bell icon for more videos like this. During the 6th century BC, a relentlessly ambitious Persian king named Cyrus II conquered the 3 major powers of the Near East and founded the Achaemenid Empire. Its reach would stretch from the Mediterranean Sea to the Indus River, making it the largest empire the world had ever seen. His ability to conquer vast swaths of land and insistence on treating his subjects with mercy, kindness, and compassion earned him the name Cyrus the Great. Cyrus the Great was born around 600 BC in the ancient region of Persis to the king of Anshon, Cambyses I, and Queen Mendana of Media. Cyrus's parents belonged to the Achaemenid dynasty, which made them descendants of the dynasty's legendary eponymous founder, King Achaemenes, who reigned over the city of Anshon during the late 8th century BC. Cyrus was named after his paternal grandfather, thus making him Cyrus II. His traditional Persian name, Kurosh, meaning sun, was in honor of the celestial body worshipped within Persian culture. According to the 5th century Greek historian Herodotus, Cyrus's maternal grandfather, King Astyages, ruler of the Median Empire, had a dream before his grandson's birth in which water flowed from his pregnant daughter, Mandana's womb, flooding the entirety of his realm. His council of advisors interpreted this dream as a prophecy foretelling that his grandchild would one day overthrow him as ruler. As a precaution, Astyages decided to marry Mandana off to the king of Anshon, Cambyses I, believing that the son of such a weak and insignificant monarch could never supplant his rule. In a subsequent dream, Astyages watched as his empire became overgrown with vines that sprouted from Mandana's womb. This caused Astyages to become exceedingly paranoid, which led him to command his most senior general, Harpagus, to slay the baby upon its birth. Unable to commit such a vile act, Harpagus ordered one of his herdsmen, Mithridates, to kill the baby boy instead. Unbeknownst to Harpagus, Mithridates' wife had just suffered a stillborn birth, and the couple decided to use this as an opportunity to secretly adopt Cyrus and raise him as their own son. When Cyrus was only about 10 years old, he caught the attention of his grandfather, King Astyages, after allegedly hitting the son of a nobleman who refused to obey his orders during a children's game called King and Court. Cyrus and his adoptive father, Mithridates, was summoned by King Astyages to answer for the crime of injuring a nobleman's son. Upon his arrival, Mithridates confessed to deceiving Harpagus a decade earlier and raising Cyrus in secret. Because Cyrus had been discovered playing a game called King and Court, Astyages' advisors were confident that his prophetic dream of the boy one day becoming king had already been fulfilled. So Cyrus was allowed to return to his birth parents in the city of Anshan. In retribution for disobeying his order to kill Cyrus as a baby, Astyages had Harpagus' 13-year-old son chopped into small pieces, boiled, roasted, and prepared to be eaten. He then invited Harpagus to a large banquet where he unknowingly ate his own son. Upon being presented with his son's head, hands, and feet on a platter, Harpagus reacted calmly and proclaimed, "Whatever my king does pleases me." Harpagus proceeded to collect his son's remains, bury them at home, and begin plotting his revenge. Following the death of his father, Cambyses I, in 559 BC, Cyrus was crowned the new king of Anshan. Like many local kings, Cyrus owed allegiance to the Median Empire, which was still ruled by his grandfather. Cyrus had no intention of remaining subservient, and hostilities soon broke out, leading Astyages to send his army, led by Harpagus, to attack his grandson in 553 BC. Unbeknownst to Astyages, it was Harpagus who had incited Cyrus to revolt against his grandfather. Harpagus seized this opportunity to exact revenge on Astyages for killing his son by defecting with his army to Cyrus's side. 3 years of brutal war ended with Cyrus capturing the Median Empire's capital of Ecbatana and becoming its new ruler. To appease several of Media's former vassal states, Cyrus spared his grandfather's life and agreed to marry his daughter. Prior to this, Cyrus had already married a Persian noblewoman named Cassandana. The two were said to have been madly in love, having 2 sons and 3 daughters together. For political purposes, Cyrus would go on to take several other wives as well. With Astyages overthrown, Cyrus turned his attention to uniting the twin Achaemenid kingdoms of Parsa and Anshan into Persia proper. Cyrus's conquests of Media and Persia resulted in the founding of the Achaemenid Empire, otherwise known as the First Persian Empire. The king of Lydia, Croesus, attempted to leverage the instability to the east to expand his own territory. He was inclined to do so after consulting the Oracle of Delphi, who informed the king that a great empire would be destroyed should he choose to attack Cyrus. Emboldened by the oracle's prophecy, Croesus marched his army into Cappadocia, an area within Persian territory. This culminated in the Battle of Teria in March of 547 BC, which saw the invading Lydian forces face Cyrus and his Persian army in open battle. The battle resulted in a stalemate, with both sides sustaining heavy casualties. Croesus and his army withdrew to the Lydian capital of Sardis to await the arrival of reinforcements from allies in Sparta, Egypt, and Babylon. He anticipated that the approaching winter would discourage Cyrus from engaging in battle. However, the Persian king made the unorthodox decision to march his army toward the Lydian town of Thymbra in December of 547 BC, where he was met with a force twice the size of his own. Harpagus observed that Lydian horses were frightened by the sight and smell of camels, so he advised Cyrus to surround his archers with the animals. This completely disrupted the Lydian cavalry charge, allowing the Persian archers to wreak havoc on their enemies. Pressing on, Cyrus laid siege to the Lydian capital of Sardis in 546 BC, capturing the city after 14 days of fighting. King Croesus was the wealthiest man in the world at the time, and it is from his name that the modern expression "rich as Croesus" originates. His extreme wealth was evidenced by the fact that Persians began using gold as their primary currency directly following their conquest of Lydia. Some accounts suggest that Croesus was burned alive, while others theorize that he became an advisor to Cyrus. The Persian king was fond of surrounding himself with a diverse group of advisors, even those who he had previously viewed as enemies. To this point, Cyrus once said, "We love ourselves, notwithstanding our faults, and we ought to love our friends in like manner. All men have their flaws, and whoever looks for a friend without imperfections will never find what they seek." When Cyrus ordered a Lydian by the name of Pactius to bring Croesus's fortune to Persia, Pactyas instead used the gold to hire mercenaries and spark a revolt. The Persian king swiftly crushed Pactyas's uprising, and by reasserting his power, he managed to easily subdue the entirety of Anatolia. Cyrus ordered that Pactyas be brought to him alive, but the traitor's ultimate fate remains unknown. While several kingdoms attempted in vain to resist, others submitted voluntarily to Persian hegemony. The latter witnessed how Cyrus not only defeated the mighty king Astyages, but also how justly and respectfully he treated his subjects. The Persian king once said, "Whenever you can, act as a liberator. Freedom, dignity, wealth. These three together constitute the greatest happiness of humanity. If you bequeath all three to your people, their love for you will never die." By 540 BC, Cyrus had successfully captured the kingdom of Elam in eastern Mesopotamia and its capital of Susa, which pushed his empire's borders to the doorstep of the Neo-Babylonian Empire. During this time, Babylon was ruled by King Nabonidus, who had seized power via a coup. This power grab made Nabonidus extremely unpopular with the Babylonian people because they perceived it as having angered the city's chief god, Marduk, and began viewing the Persian king as a potential liberator. In 539 BC, Cyrus decisively defeated the Babylonian army at the Battle of Opis, and days later went on to capture Babylon, which at the time was viewed as the greatest city in the world. He accomplished this considerable feat by employing an ingenious strategy to besiege Babylon's 350-foot-high defense walls that were surrounded by a deep moat fed by the Euphrates River. Cyrus ordered that the river be diverted into a nearby canal, allowing his troops to wade through the shallow water and enter the city under the cover of night. Nabonidus quickly surrendered after the successful besieging of the city, making him the final independent king of Babylon and marking an end to thousands of years of Sumerian Akkadian rule. The fall of Babylon was most notably recorded in a Babylonian text known as the Nabonidus Chronicle. Some scholars view it as a work of propaganda by Babylonian priests of Marduk to vilify King Nabonidus following his attempt to institute the worship of the unpopular moon god Sin. Upon his monumental conquest of Babylon, the Persian king proclaimed, "I am Cyrus, king of the universe, the great king, the powerful king, king of Babylon, king of Sumer and Akkad, king of the four quarters of the world." Although Cyrus became the most powerful man on earth, he maintained a high degree of modesty throughout his life, never allowing his kind-hearted nature to be corrupted. He once said, "In my experience, men who respond to good fortune with modesty and kindness are harder to find than those who face adversity with courage." After the capture of Babylon, the Persian king issued an edict recorded on an artifact known as the Cyrus Cylinder, which is praised by scholars as the first human rights charter in history. The Cyrus Cylinder ordered the restoration of temples and religious practices, in addition to allowing all displaced Jews to return to their homelands. This famous policy is recounted in the books of Isaiah and Ezra from the Hebrew Bible, documenting the liberation of Jewish people exiled by Nebuchadnezzar a half-century earlier. The 8th century BC Israelite prophet Isaiah named Cyrus the Messiah, or Anointed One of Yahweh, and presented him as a God-given savior. The Persian king holds the honor of being the only foreigner ever to be hailed as the Messiah of the Jewish people. Not much is known about Cyrus's personal religious beliefs, but he is thought to have been a devout Zoroastrian. Zoroastrianism is a monotheistic ancient Persian religion that worships a deity named Ahura Mazda. The faith was founded by a religious reformer named Zoroaster during the 6th century BC. It is one of the world's oldest religions and is considered to have influenced the development of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. Cyrus oversaw and pioneered many groundbreaking strategies on and off the battlefield. The most well-known of these is the establishment of the Immortals, a group of elite soldiers who served dual roles as both heavy infantry units in combat and personal bodyguards to the Persian king. The Immortals' elite training and weaponry made them proficient warriors who were greatly feared by their enemies. The title of Immortals comes from the policy that the soldiers always remained at a strength of 10,000 men, which was achieved by immediately replacing a warrior once wounded, sick, or dead. Rather than dismantling the cultures and customs of those he conquered, Cyrus sought to learn from them and regularly adopted their policies, fashions, and organizational systems. Cyrus's empire was home to 4 capital cities: Pasargadae, Ecbatana, Babylon, and Susa, each of which enjoyed a level of self-governance while still owing fealty to the Persian ruler. The empire's territory was divided into 26 provinces, known as satrapies, with a satrap acting as a kind of governor. State secretaries and generals were appointed to aid with administration and maintain order within the satrapies. This system worked so well that it was adopted by subsequent rulers, including Alexander the Great, who conquered Persia 2 centuries later. Cyrus used the riches he amassed from his conquests to fund his many building projects and campaigns. This allowed him to lower taxes throughout the empire, making him very popular among his subjects. As he once said, "Success always calls for greater generosity, though most people, lost in the darkness of their own egos, treat it as an occasion for greater greed. Collecting wealth is not an end in itself, but only a means for building an empire. Riches would be of little use to us now, except as a means of winning new friends." It is uncertain exactly how Cyrus the Great died, but Herodotus claims that the Persian king met his end at the hands of a nomadic tribe known as the Massagetae. Cyrus offered to marry the ruler of the Massagetae, a warrior queen named Tomarus, who had recently become a widow. However, Tomarus refused the marriage proposal and warned the Persian king to leave her territory immediately. Unwilling to do so, Cyrus chose to engage in battle with the queen and her nomadic warriors. Knowing that the Massagetae were unfamiliar with the inebriating effects of alcohol, Cyrus cleverly positioned his weakest soldiers with copious amounts of wine as he hid with his strongest men. The Massagetae, led by Tomarus's only son, wiped out the feeble Persian soldiers. As they proceeded to get drunk from the wine, Cyrus ambushed and massacred the intoxicated Massagetae warriors. As a result, the queen's son was captured and ultimately committed suicide, filling Tomarus with rage. The warrior queen then confronted Cyrus with her own army, ultimately defeating his troops and killing the king in December of 530 BC. Allegedly, Tomarus decapitated Cyrus and mockingly dipped his head in blood, saying, "Drink your fill of blood." After the Persians were allowed to collect their king's body, Cyrus was entombed in the capital city of Pasargadae, surrounded by his beloved gardens and laid to rest inside a golden coffin with a collection of treasures. The inscription on his tomb read, "Whoever you are and wherever you come from, for I know you will come. I am Cyrus, who won the Persians their empire. Do not therefore begrudge me this bit of earth that covers my bones." The valuables within his tomb were looted during the chaos that followed Alexander the Great's invasion of Persia. The Macedonian king made great efforts to restore Cyrus's tomb, which still stands today despite countless wars in the area over the centuries. Alexander was a great admirer of Cyrus the Great, due in large part to Xenophon's biography of the Persian king known as the Cyropaedia, meaning the education of Cyrus. The Greek philosopher praised the Persian king, writing, "He honored his subjects and cared for them as if they were his own children, and they, on their part, revered Cyrus as a father." Cyrus the Great is often described as a philosopher king who is perceived as the ideal leader by the ancient world. He once said, "Brevity is the soul of command. Too much talking suggests desperation on the part of the leader. Speak shortly, decisively, and to the point, and couch your desires in such natural logic that no one can raise objections. Then move on." Through never-ending determination and unprecedented benevolence, Cyrus the Great founded the first Persian Empire and immortalized himself as one of the most influential ancient figures in history. Consider liking, commenting, and subscribing for more videos like this.